happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum, and it's later than you think.
I'm Ann Northrup. Hello.
On this week's show, we're going to give you the LGBT angles on the week in politics.
Yeah, we're going to go through those very depressing Democratic primaries and debates. And we're also going to talk about how the Supreme Court may let public agencies or religious agencies that discriminate against us receive public funds.
The president has appointed an unqualified gay man to oversee our U.S. intelligence services.
Good and bad news from Kentucky.
Yeah, a bunch of stories from Kentucky. Catholic high school students protested the firing of the gay and lesbian teachers we told you about.
A Mormon college softened its policy on same-sex dating, or did it?
The out Prime Minister of Ireland is out.
Trump, of course, you must have seen, hates the movie Parasite. We know all the jokes about that. But he tweeted that an Indian gay-themed movie is great. But was that real or was that sarcasm?
It's the strangest story of the week. And
maybe not the strangest.
Disney's new Pixar film is including a lesbian character voiced by a lesbian.
Shocking.
All right.
All right, really shocking, the Democratic debates. I mean, really.
Then we've got to stop calling them debates. They're forums, and they are co-sponsored by the Democratic National Committee in conjunction with the networks, which basically just want to sell soap and get you to watch. They're like reality shows. Why is the DNC agreeing to these formats that certainly don't show off their candidates to advantage?
Well, what has the DNC done right in recent memory?
Democratic National Committee.
They're running these caucuses that are a disaster. They have very strange rules about who's allowed to appear on the stage at these debates, and they put too many people on at a time, and the whole format does nothing but encourage people to scream at each other. Yeah. It's very bad.
Well, it did. The one that was on this week did calm down a little bit, and they did get to some issues. Towards the second half, they started asking some questions about war and peace and things like that.
Yeah, maybe everybody just got a little tired.
What I'm struck by, and you may call me naive, of course, a lot of this centers around, Bernie Sanders and his past support for,
dictators.
Well, liberation regimes that turned into dictators or were dictators, etc. I mean, that turned out badly, but might have done some good things. I mean, you could look at...
Well, what are you going to look? Here's what I want someone to say to Bernie. So are you going to say that Trump, because maybe one or two good things have happened under his regime, should be lauded for that while he's destroying the country?
Bernie isn't lauding Fidel Castro.
It's a question of emphasis, and that's what people are looking at.
And he says, I condemn authoritarian regimes, and Trump doesn't.
Yeah, but condemning it. Here's my beef against Bernie this week, and I have no candidate in this race.
We don't have a candidate.
Usually we're fudging when we say we're nonpartisan, but we
the viewers
really
keep saying you hate Pete or you hate Bernie.
No, I don't like any of them. We don't like any of them. But
how can anybody like anybody after all the exposure and the attacks?
Well, here's my current beef against Bernie, and I've only heard one person on TV notice this. Bernie says, yes, they told me that the Russians were trying to mess with my campaign. Really? Well, when did they tell you that? Oh, about a month ago.
Yeah.
Really? Why didn't you tell us about that? Why didn't you come out immediately and tell the public about that and do something about making sure that your campaign was not affected by this? Alert the people and do something.
Yeah. Why didn't Obama tell us that Russians were interfering during the 2016 campaign?
He should have.
Because Mitch McConnell said, don't do that.
He should have done something, and Bernie should have done something a month ago.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Sometimes I feel just like...
you sound like an apologist for Bernie.
Well, I think there's a bunch of attacks against Bernie that I think are totally inappropriate. He's not even a Democrat.
No, that's stupid.
Well, I mean, he caucuses with the Democrats. He supports Democratic candidates.
It's ridiculous.
The fact that he's an independent in a country where more than a third of the voters now are independent is
I'm not sure he's their kind of independent, but
possibly appealing.
But I agree with you, that is a ridiculous attack.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of attacks that are not ridiculous.
I think he could phrase things better.
Yeah.
Yes. But then when Pete starts attacking him for essentially being part of the 60s revolution.
Ridiculous.
The 60s revolution is what got us the LGBT movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, all those things.
Again, all of them have deep problems, all of them.
But if you were from Mars and all you got to see was the debate, you don't know anything else about them, who would you vote for?
None of them.
Now.
But a friend of mine came up with a very interesting vice presidential candidate that I had not heard of or thought of before. Maybe I'm way behind. Ready?
Yes.
Michelle Obama.
Oh, people have, yes, that's been put out there.
Well,
I think she'd be out of her mind to...
well, I do too, but I think she would appeal to a lot of the public.
Well,
and I have to apologize to the viewers because I predicted a couple of weeks ago that Bloomberg would be asked about his anti-trans comments in the debates, and he has not been asked about any of that.
No, but he got the chance to trumpet his longtime leading support for same-sex marriage. I was a leader on that, he said.
You weren't.
In his answers to the Human Rights Campaign presidential questionnaire, which you can look up, which is
at hrc.org.
/election 2020. And you can read all the candidates' answers to these questionnaires. He has the nerve to say, I came out for same-sex marriage in 2005 and then helped pass it in the New York legislature in 2005, as we have told you.
They all exaggerate their support.
Hold it. That's when that's so perverse, because that's the day in 2005, because he wouldn't say where he stood on same-sex marriage before that. That's the day he was ordered to issue marriage licenses to gay couples in New York, and he appealed the decision and was successful in overturning that decision by a judge. So that was an outrage.
I think they're all perverse in their answers. They're all exaggerating their credentials. Some of them are outright lying at times. And on this HRC questionnaire of 18 questions, they give identical answers, all of them. I don't know how reading that questionnaire is going to help you distinguish among any of them.
Are you suggesting that there's collusion?
I am suggesting that it's very hard to take any of them at face value.
Oh. And then Mike Bloomberg says, I always release my taxes as mayor. Well, I watched a segment on that this morning of a reporter who was invited in to look at the taxes. You were not allowed to take notes. You could stare at the documents, and there were no numbers on the tax returns. There was just like the letter G, meaning over $500,000, and the money was all over the world, and who God knows where, and we don't know anything about him any more than we know about Trump's taxes.
It's depressing. This is why I think it's depressing, because there are no good answers, there are no easy answers, and none of them are to be trusted.
And I keep saying either people are ready to get rid of this monster in the White House or they're not. And if they are, they will vote for whoever to do it.
Well, even more depressing, I talked to, I don't think I said this last week, a Bernie supporter, and they're all quite avid for Bernie. And I said, well, look, if Bloomberg gets the nomination, you're going to have to vote for Bloomberg to get rid of Trump. Oh, no, I won't. I would rather have, and I swear this is a direct quote, 4 more years of Trump than 8 possible years of Bloomberg.
You can't argue with people like that.
No, I didn't.
You can't argue with people like that.
No.
I'm not a Mike fan, although he was endorsed by former Mayor Dinkins this week. I was very disappointed in David for doing that, because he's not my first choice.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to make a point about the no trans questions to Bloomberg. First of all, I think it's a sign that the network moderators and the other candidates do not want to touch trans questions. Right. And that's why they didn't challenge him on that.
Then challenge him on marriage.
Well, they're not smart enough or educated enough to do that. And that is where they are across the board on our issues. I was at a brunch with a bunch of friends this weekend of mixed sexual orientations. And someone said to another one, a straight woman, well, did you ever, it just came up, did you ever see the HBO version of Angels in America? And she said, what's that? And I thought, wow, we really do live in a bubble. Most of the world does not really pay any attention or have any knowledge about our issues.
Except you, dear viewers, and we appreciate your being here. And I'm sorry if we're not able to be more hopeful about this.
It was just a good reminder about the extent to which we are still invisible to most people, yes. And not the subject of
The thing is, and I've said this, there are all these polls out there. Somebody said, oh, bringing up same-sex marriage in South Carolina, that's a real winning issue. I looked up the polling there. 53% of people in South Carolina across the board support same-sex marriage.
Sure.
But that is not the issue that they're going to vote on, basically, is what I'm saying.
Right.
I mean, 80% say our civil rights should be protected by a federal law. 80%, and we don't have it.
And they're not, and they will still vote for Trump, who would be against that, because there are other issues that overwhelm their support.
More
for
about
us.
which later.
All
right. One of the big gay scenes this week was on the campaign trail. Pete Buttigieg was doing a town hall or something, and he took questions from the audience that were written down, and it was a question from a 9-year-old saying,
9-year-old boy,
Zachary, and you inspire me. How can you give me the courage to come out? And then he starts to answer, but then apparently the kid is waving, somebody's waving, and he brings the kid up to the stage.
Well, his mother sent him up to the stage. Pete didn't ask him to come up.
Now, this kid, so he obviously had the support of his parents. I just think, as a former youth service provider, I would be cautious about exposing a 9-year-old to the world coming out if he's asking about the courage to come out, because there can be consequence for that. He obviously has support of his parents, but Pete's not going to be there for him when he's back at school.
Well, again,
if anything
Pete
happens.
did not bring him up to the stage. That is not what happened. The parents pushed him towards the stage, and he pushed himself towards the stage.
I just think some degree of caution, especially at that age. And again, this is not part of, of course, the right wing is all, oh, a 9-year-old doesn't know what he is. Well, I knew what I was when I was 5, but at least I knew I was different. But just a degree of caution should be involved with kids in such public displays.
We all go through processes of discovery, and if we were more neutral about all these potential orientations or identities, we wouldn't be warning people about, oh, you may not be sure yet. We'd be saying, oh, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, maybe you're straight, maybe you're not, whatever.
Wouldn't say
no,
that.
I'm talking about your right-wing objections. I wish Pete had been a little warmer towards him. I thought he was a little
I think he was a little scared because he came out when he was 33.
Well, I thought the kid was pretty charming and, of course, brave to ask the question, to be able to formulate the question.
It moved a lot of people. I'm always just concerned about these kids when they get back in their environments and what happens, because there's so much bullying out there. I mean, we cover it all the time on this show. It happens a lot in New York, which is, you might think of as a liberal city, but it happens tons here.
Pete got some big endorsements this week from the San Diego Union Tribune in California, which is not a liberal newspaper, or hasn't been historically.
And San Diego has changed so much. It used to be a Republican stronghold.
Yeah.
And also by the second largest paper in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Well, we'll see what happens in South Carolina this Saturday, which is when the vote is, and it'll be interesting to see whether any of these crazy debates have had any effect on anything. You know, everybody praised Elizabeth Warren after the last debate, but it didn't seem to move her position in the Nevada vote.
Nope.
So I don't know whether any of this will have any effect on the vote.
Okay.
Trump?
Is everything clear now? Yes,
I think
Trump.
so.
Well, I was very disappointed to see the Village people giving him permission to use YMCA.
No.
Yes. It's the modern version of the Village people. It's not the old crowd like
I don't care who
Randy.
it is.
Oh, it's terrible. And their explanation for this, well, we're not political, but we're happy that all people want to.
We're desperate for attention, and if the monster wants to use it, that's okay with us.
Right. But there are a lot of horror stories in the last, in the last week. The pardons, the purging, the purging of all people who aren't totally devoted to Trump, being run by Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas. Is it fair to bring that up? I mean,
I think it's extremely fair. And how about Trump's going after Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Ginsburg?
They need to recuse themselves, he said.
Unbelievable.
At a press conference in India.
Unbelievable.
You need to not be in India and not notice that they are killing Muslims over there at this point.
Oh, he's not noticing that. But how dare any president go after Supreme Court justices like that? I don't care what your party affiliation is or anything. You do not, as a president, suggest that Supreme Court justices should recuse themselves because they ruled against you in a case.
I would have to go to the record on that. I really hate Trump. Hate, there's that word. I
think it's outrageous.
All right. So. Anyway, the Trump court upheld his means testing on immigrants. When you want to come in here, you better have dough. That it was noted this week that the Ninth Circuit, out on the West Coast, California, or the other West Coast states, has effectively flipped with they have this one appointee named Daniel Collins breaking all the rules to force review of decisions he doesn't like. He's now appointed a third of the circuit. Only two of his appointees have any prior judicial experience. This might be of concern to you if you're trying to get justice in the country.
And the Senate confirmed another appointee to the 11th Circuit in Atlanta, this guy Andrew Brasher, 38 years old, lifetime appointment.
Lifetime anti-gay bigot.
Yep. Misogynist. And Trump has now appointed 6 of the 13 judges on the 11th Circuit. He is right on the verge of flipping all these courts.
And he's got another year to do it, and the Republicans are going to let him do whatever he wants to do. So then there's Rick Grinnell, who was his ambassador to Germany, our ambassador to Germany, an out gay man. No intelligence experience. He's being put in charge of, there he is with his friend Donald, being put in charge of the intelligence services, and this is a whole ruse. He could never be confirmed to the appointment. He's not being nominated. He's an interim appointment, but when Trump nominates somebody, he could pick somebody totally unqualified that they won't confirm, so he can keep Rick Grinnell doing this job while he's still ambassador to Germany.
I think he has revealed, without people really noticing, why he put Rick Grinnell in that job. And that is what Rick Grinnell did immediately, which was demand the release of all sorts of data from the intelligence agencies to him, so he could then give them all to Trump and everybody else.
It's totally outrageous. Yeah. But apparently, this is the first cabinet-level appointment of an out gay person in history. The highest one in the Obama administration was John Berry, who was head of the Office of Personnel Management, which my friend Mike Rogers tried to tell me was cabinet level, but I couldn't find that on the internets.
I have a nightmare scenario for you.
Sure. Well,
Rick Grinnell, Supreme Court Justice.
Well,
he'd have to be confirmed, and that might be difficult.
They're putting anybody in. They're putting anybody in at this point.
Yeah.
Well.
And meanwhile, the Supreme Court, even without Rick Grinnell or any other new Trump appointee, decided this week to take a case that concerns us. It is Fulton versus the City of Philadelphia. And this is the longstanding case of the City of Philadelphia, which has a non-discrimination law covering sexual orientation and gender identity, taking away city funding from a Catholic adoption services agency because the agency discriminates and will not assign foster or adoptive kids to same-sex families, couples, parents.
And again, this isn't about the right of a Catholic agency only to give Catholics babies if they want to, but they've got to do that with their own money, not with our money. And if you're going to use our money, you have to comply with the civil law. All agencies in New York that get city money have to sign something saying, in the provision of services and in hiring, we will follow the city's laws around all these things. Of course, I don't think that they do follow it, and I don't think the city checks up on a lot of these agencies.
No, but for instance, the Salvation Army has had to change some of its policies because of laws like that. But this agency, this Catholic agency, has been fighting back against the city and saying, you're not honoring our religious freedom to make our choices. And the answer, of course, is you can make whatever choices you want. As Andy just said, you can't use city public money to do it. Well, they have been to court, and the courts, the lower courts, have decided in favor of the city and said your non-discrimination policy is not discriminating against their religion. It is a neutral law that says you cannot discriminate in the awarding of city funds in these ways, and therefore you, the city, are right and the agency is wrong. But the agency, supported by the usual right-wing law firms, is pursuing this. And now the Supreme Court has agreed to hear this case. And that is very potentially bad news for us because A, they have a 5-person majority on the Supreme Court. B, we could easily lose this case and lose the right to have non-discrimination laws apply on our behalf. And C, it can then be extrapolated very, very widely to all sorts of cases and situations, and soon we'll have Sharia law in place.
Please,
and
they're already going to rule. They've already heard the case where they're going to, probably rule against us to allow all kinds of money to go to religious institutions, no matter what they do, to run schools and other kinds of services. That's the direction everything is going. This case is not even going to be heard until the next term. But we have a lot of cases coming down the pike. Maybe we won't hear until June, probably won't hear until June, about what happened with all those gay rights cases and trans rights cases that they heard.
And whether sex discrimination includes sexual orientation.
All major child welfare agencies oppose this suit, by the way. It is being handled by something called the Beckett Law Group, which is a
like the Alliance Defending Freedom,
which is a religious right group. Now they do have a new archbishop in Philadelphia, replacing the hard right anti-gay Chaput. And this guy's name is Nelson Perez, and nobody seems to have reached out to him and said, hey, you had a gay ministry in your last diocese in Cleveland. Do you really want to pursue this kind of thing against gay people? And it's not just against gays, it's against Jews or people
Muslims
who don't follow your religion as well.
Well, I am more skeptical than you that any official of the Catholic Church is going to side with us against a Catholic agency.
I don't think they will, but I think they should be put on the spot on it. And I think Philadelphia activists should get out there, ask for a meeting, and if he won't give you a meeting, have a little picket line up there and expose this guy. Don't let him play Santa Claus. And act like I said St. Francis. Pope Francis is, the good Pope, put him in there to replace the bad guy. Well, let's find out. Now, I should also point out that there is a religious agency that provides foster care services there that is opposed to same-sex marriage and that said, no, we'll comply with the city law. It's not a problem.
I'd like to know what that agency is.
Well, it's in the briefs. They didn't say which one of the.
We'll do a little research and come back with that.
Meanwhile, it's not all bad news, and of course the U.S. House is still on our side. They did pass the Equality Act, and they've now introduced a bill to offer X as a gender marker on U.S. passports. It was introduced by Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California.
Well, back to Catholicism. In following up on the situation in Burien, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Washington, by the SeaTac airport, the Kennedy Catholic High School, which forced out 2 teachers, one gay man, one lesbian, when it became clear they were about to marry their same-sex partners, the students held a big sit-in and walkout on behalf of the teachers. There's the walkout.
Huge.
Yeah, really big. And I like the sit-in picture, too. Can we put that up? There they are, lining the halls of the school, sitting in on behalf of the teachers, protesting the Catholic schools forcing out of their beloved long-term teachers simply because they're marrying their partners.
And at first the bishop acted like he had nothing to do with it, and then he acknowledged, yes, I did it. I forced them out.
It just seems to me such hypocrisy for an institution that is so adamantly devoted to the idea that everyone must marry and be in these faithful and holy marriages, and then when 2 people actually want to get married, that's not good enough.
When you're gay, it's the worst thing you can do, because then you are in a constant state of sin. That's basically the attitude like that. I mean, John McNeil, the priest who wrote The Church of the Homosexual, used to talk about that. You could be forgiven for tricking on a Saturday night or something, and if you thought that would, then you confess that as wrong. But you could not be forgiven for being in a relationship.
Crazy. In Madison, Wisconsin, 14, I put this in quotes, Christian parents are suing the schools because they have a policy to protect the privacy of trans kids. They don't immediately go running to the parents to say, hey, your kid is trans. They take care of the kids in their charge. So the Christian parents are suing the school and saying, hey, if my kid is coming to school and saying they're trans, you better be calling me up and telling me. How dare you?
Let's do another religious story at Brigham Young University, a Mormon college. So they modified their thing, which basically forbade all homosexual relationships and expression, and they're sort of saying that gay dating is okay. So we got this picture of these women kissing right in front of Brigham Young. So the honor code is still in place, but they've removed the more prescriptive language, and they're sort of...
It seems to be okay to hold hands and kiss. Premarital sex is still outlawed for everybody, including straight students. The question is, what about married homosexual students?
They don't support, the church doesn't support same-sex marriage. They're not going to support that. They're fudging because just like with those kids in Seattle, Tacoma, or whatever, you said SeaTac, I can't remember which the city it was in. But
Burien.
All right. Let's go to...
Well, still in the Mormons, they've issued a new handbook that has some very bad language against trans people and non-binary people. So they're not stepping out in great progressive ways.
All right, we got a bunch of stories from Kentucky. Well, first of all, let's give you some good news. The city of Cold Spring, population 6,370, enacted an LGBT rights law, 4-1. It's the third in Kentucky this year, and the 5th in northern Kentucky, and the 19th in the state. And a statewide bill has had 2 hearings but no vote. And Governor Beshear supports it, and he went to a rally at the Capitol about it.
Yes.
And the Republican legislature is working to take away most of his powers.
Yeah, ever since he was elected, they're trying to pass laws in the legislature that disempower him. That's happening in several states. Well, it happened in North Carolina, Wisconsin, North Carolina. And I keep getting these, promotional emails from Amy McGrath's campaign, the Democrat running against Mitch McConnell, saying, they're tied, they're tied. And I don't know how seriously to take that. I could certainly engage in wishful thinking, but these are signs in these stories that some of Kentucky is slowly turning blue.
Except on the Senate, where the committee there, Senate committee, passed the so-called conscience bill to let healthcare providers refuse care if they have religious objections, including to trans people. But it is much broader than that, and Governor Beshear said he would veto it, but simple majorities can overcome a veto. You don't need 2/3.
I was going to say, I'm sure that it's a veto-proof majority in the Senate.
You just need a majority.
Yeah, in Arizona, a committee in the House there has approved a ban on trans student athletes competing in their lived gender. They want to hold them to their birth certificate gender. And that's a recipe for disaster, as we saw with the wrestler in Texas. Here's my, now, you think the Disney story is the story of the week. Here's my favorite. Iowa. Now, I assume this is a crazy person in the state Senate, but I don't know that for sure. A state senator in Iowa has proposed a bill that would order everyone getting married to declare their sexual orientation on the marriage license, so that if later they come out, say a man and woman get married and somewhere along the way one of them comes out and says, you know what, I'm really gay, lesbian, whatever, that declaration on the license can be evidence of the fact that they lied when they got married and can be used in a custody battle.
Yes. How about criminal penalties while you're at it?
Exactly. Prison.
Well, I want to give them some good stories.
There's no sign that this is going to pass, but if it advances, we'll certainly let you know.
I want to. This is one of my favorite stories, and it's not like a totally new thing. But in Florida, they had a big 2-day conference on how to make schools safe for LGBT students. It was the 6th annual, so it's not like news, but the attendees represented 90% of the student population. It's the biggest such thing basically in the country at this point, and it's in Florida, run by Equality Florida's Safe and Healthy Schools initiative. This should be taking place in every state, and this is a right-wing state.
Well, as long as you're in Florida, I'm going to go slightly out of order with the pictures we have set up with the control room, because I'm really sad to hear about the death of the mayor of Wilton Manors, out gay Justin Flippin, 41 years old, suddenly of a brain aneurysm as he was in his car driving to a city meeting.
He was elected mayor in 2018. It was the first time a Florida city had elected an all LGBTQ city commission. He was first elected to that commission in 2010, stepped down to run for the Florida House when there was not an out legislator. He worked for the Greater Florida Visitors Bureau, seeking to make it the second gayest city in America. But
he was beloved as the mayor of Wilton Manors, and
it's shocking to people.
Well, I saw a local news report today where the police chief, an old white guy, was in tears talking about how kind and loving his leadership was, the mayor, and how devastating this news was, and how upset everyone was. So, Justin Flippin, thank you for your work.
Very sad.
Very, very sorry to hear about your death, and just sad.
And we'll go back to the previous picture, also a victory for the community, you could argue. Rebecca Mercer, a climate change denialist, a big contributor to right-wing groups.
Including Trump.
She used to run Breitbart. So, she's been on the board of the American Museum of Natural History, a climate change denier. So the group called Revolting Lesbians, banding together with all kinds of scientific groups, have been protesting her presence on the board for 2 years. I've been to many of these demonstrations. We got a picture of them parading in Rebecca Mercer masks through the Great Hall of the American Museum of Natural History.
With the dinosaur skeletons.
Oh, boy. Now, the museum will only say, well, her term was up, and she did, she's not going to be on the board anymore.
It turns out that you can have 3 consecutive terms on the board. She had completed 2. very unusual, I think, for someone to not do the 3 terms. So they say it's just her term was up, but the real answer is that these demonstrations for the last 2 years and all the complaints by all the scientists have led to the demise of Rebecca Mercer from the board.
The board should have kicked her off. Corey Johnson is our Speaker of the Council. He's an ex officio member of the board, and he did call for her to be removed from the board, but it was never done.
In Montrose, Michigan, a high school class was assigned an essay. Write an essay called Taking a Stand. Talk about some issue and take a position and defend it. So this junior in the class,
Destiny McDermott, 16,
who has 2 moms at home, wanted to write about same-sex marriage. And the teacher said, no, you are not doing that. And I don't know if she tried to kick her out of the class.
She said, and I'm grading the paper, so you can just try it and you'll see what happens. What you were doing is, it might offend some of the students, and I'm not going to let you do this. So, well, let's give the end of the story. This was all brought to the attention of the administration by the mother and everybody else, and the administration said, this is ridiculous,
yes.
Totally inappropriate.
But the moms and the students are not entirely happy because evidently this teacher has not been punished adequately.
Yeah, the student was allowed to transfer out of the class, thank goodness.
Yeah, but I think the teacher should have transferred out of the class, and there was a meeting to educate the faculty as a whole that this kind of behavior by the teacher was inappropriate, but the teacher is not appropriate.
Now, this didn't come up in the South Carolina debate, but they apparently have had a law there since 1988 forbidding any mention of gay relationships, same-sex relationships, except in the context of sexually transmitted infections.
You mean in schools?
Yes.
You didn't say schools.
Oh, sorry, in the schools. So NCLR, National Center for Lesbian Rights, Lambda, they're suing over this to get this removed. The Attorney General of South Carolina says, yeah, it sounds unconstitutional to me. But Southern Equality, the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, they're all suing. And, well, they're going to federal court, despite the fact that we've got a high court that is anti-LGBT. So we'll see how we will do with that.
And a sad story about another death, this in Puerto Rico, of a trans woman, Nulisa Luciano Ruiz, known as Alexa. Trans woman went into a ladies' room, was harassed and bashed for just using the ladies' room, and attacked by a group of guys who murdered her.
I think they have some video, don't they?
They videoed the murder as they were doing it, and they posted it online.
Whew.
What is in people's heads?
Boy.
So, rest in peace, Alexa. Very sorry to hear about this, and everyone else. I would tell you to take care of yourselves, but, hard to avoid a gang of people that are singling you out and coming after you with violent intent like that.
I'm going to balance that with a better story, a good story. In Omaha, it has the first in the nation LGBT transitional living home for the formerly incarcerated. It's called Leiden House. It's run by something called Black and Pink organization. It's going to house 3 people, but have a lot of services for others. And it's going to provide reentry services. And they're also looking to open a youth-centered home.
Nice.
And Alabama, do we talk about the House committee there that approved a bill to block trans students from participating in sports consistent with their gender?
I read that, and then I read the Arizona story, and I thought I must have made a mistake writing it down originally as Alabama, but it's both?
Alabama and Arizona.
Same thing.
All right. Okay.
International news?
Oh, I do want to say that also on the positive side, the Human Rights Campaign and SAGE, for older people, has launched the long-term Equality Index, and you can go to thelei.org to promote equitable care for us older folks as we, need long-term care communities. And it's a very extensive site. Lots of reports. Your organization can endorse it. Your center can say we will abide by these principles. That's a good thing.
Good. Well, not so good is that the gay prime minister, or Taoiseach.
Taoiseach.
Taoiseach?
Yeah.
All right. I won't have to say it much anymore because now he's out. And not just out, but out.
He had to resign. I mean, there's no clear successor after the elections. The thing
This is Leo Varadkar.
He's the head of the Fianna Gael party and the Fianna Fáil party. I mean, the people who got the most votes were from the
We have a sad picture of him, if the control room would put that up. Leo Varadkar of Ireland.
Looking down there.
Yes. There he is.
It was great progress that they
contemplating his
and
future.
He's not just gay, but he's also the parent of immigrants.
No, the son of immigrants.
Yes, the son, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm losing it as well. I need that long-term care. He did oversee the relaxation of the abortion law and the legalization of same-sex marriage.
Yep.
But no party won a mandate to govern, and his party won't cooperate with the left-wing party in terms of forming a government. Okay.
Yeah, things are a little up in the air again in Ireland.
What the hell is going on in Bollywood? So they've got this gay-themed film. It's called it translates to Be Extra Careful About Marriage, starring a very popular actor in Bollywood there, Ayushmann Khurrana, as an openly gay man battling traditional attitudes to be with his boyfriend. It's already been banned by the United Arab Emirates and in Kenya, but this week, Peter Tatchell, the gay leader in England, posted something positive about this, and it was retweeted by Donald Trump, who put the single word "great" on the retweet. Peter was horrified.
Well, we don't know whether that was sincere or sarcastic, and we don't know what it might have had to do with the fact that Trump was about to go to India for 2 days. I mean, was he saying great, or was he saying great? Who knows?
We don't
because
know.
There is no nuance in Donald Trump's tweeting.
Well, it was exposed this week that, Rick Grinnell, who is now our head of intelligence services, who once convened a meeting over in Europe about, we have to get rid of all these laws against gay sex around the world, has accomplished absolutely nothing.
Does that come as a surprise to you?
Well, I mean, if you're going to put it out there a year ahead of the election.
No, it's all out. It's just because Trump is trying to assert that we are his friends and that he's trying to grab every little corner of the electorate that he can. If he can pick off 1 or 2% of us and 1 or 2% more of people of color, or 1 or 2% more of women.
None of those things are going to pick us off. They're not going to pick these. The things.
It'll pick off some of us.
No, it doesn't. It's not meant to pick us off. It's the stuff he does, quote unquote, for African Americans is not going to. They're not dumb enough to vote for him. But it's meant to appeal to
white
soccer
suburban
moms
women
in the suburbs.
Yes,
that's what it's all about.
Well, whatever. It's all a phony business. You certainly didn't think when Rick Grinnell announced this program that he was going to do anything.
I think we said that on this program.
Yes.
Okay. But you can't deny the progress made by the Canadian Olympic swimmer Marcus Thormeyer. He says in an interview that he was very nervous about coming out to his teammates, and his performance was suffering. We got a picture of him. His performance was suffering as a result. So he said, I've got to come out because it's just affecting me too badly. And he slipped in for the fact that he was going to be meeting his boyfriend for a date, and no one batted an eye, and his performance level took off. And there were no more distractions. I could finally be me.
This was before the 2016 Rio Olympics, but he is now talking about how long-term his performance has improved since coming out, which just proves my my mantra: coming out makes you happier, safer, and more successful.
Yes.
Perhaps even if you're 9 years old, but I don't want to make it a blanket statement for everybody.
All right, let's go back to the bad news. Croatia. They have a 150-year-old festival there in Imotski, and it featured enthusiastic residents cheering the burning of a gay male couple holding a child.
In effigy,
of course. They said the fact this is abnormal for us. One effigy had the face of a member of parliament who supported same-sex couples being allowed to be foster parents. The Croatian president, though, Zoran Milanovic, condemned the effigy burning, calling it inhumane, unpleasant, and totally unacceptable.
Yes, that was good, but the townsfolk don't seem to be intimidated by that.
Right.
Meanwhile, better news from Brazil, where an out trans dancer, Camila Prins, there she is, was chosen to lead a Sao Paulo carnival contingent. They're referring to her as the godmother of the drummers. And this, believe it or not, in Brazil was a unique and new experience.
It's a very coveted spot in these events, and she was the first trans woman to be given that. I mean, supermodels want to do it, TV celebrities want that role, but she got this iconic role. So even in Bolsonaro's Brazil, that happened.
But in Barbados, a trans woman, Alexa Hoffman, was fired by the Court Caribbean law practice. She was a legal assistant, and she's filed a complaint with the Employment Rights Tribunal because they just fired her because of who she was.
We've told you about the plight of these men in Nigeria who were arrested at a birthday party, a lot of them at a hotel. 47 were arrested, 10 of them fled. They're all pleading not, this was back in 2018, but they're going to trial now. And there was an extensive story about them, and they've had their lives completely ruined. One of them was like a driver who drove some people, who was just a cab driver who drove some of them there, but he's been linked to this, so he's been arrested, and his life is over. They're all getting fired from their jobs. They face 10 years in prison under a law that has actually never been used, this law against same-sex marriage.
Well,
but it is terrifying.
It's not the first time this has happened in history, but as we make advances and become more visible, there is backlash.
There's backlash and there is scapegoating, and that's what I think it is. It's the government scapegoating. Oh, well, we're pure, we're good, and we stop it. Or
bad things are happening in our country, and therefore we're going to blame you because you're weak and vulnerable, and we're going to take it out on you. Yes. As is happening with this rugby star who won't shut up, Israel Folau, who basically was driven out of Australia for all his homophobia and ended up on a French rugby team. I'm not sure we've always identified him as a rugby player. We may have occasionally referred to him as a soccer player, but he's not. He's rugby. So his latest thing is that, God hates the gays, and he blames the Australian brush fires on us. So fans showed up at a match in the stadium at France carrying rainbow flags to protest him. And the French authorities made them put away the rainbow flags and took them away from them.
The coach of the team that hired him said, if he speaks out again on this, he will be fired. So that's not happening?
No. The fans are being told to put away their rainbow flags, and he's still playing.
Outrageous.
And still spouting his homophobic remarks.
A lot of homophobia in sport. In Poland, we're up to now 100 municipalities that have declared themselves free from LGBT ideology. About a third of the country, an area the size of Hungary.
You can't get rid of us that quickly.
The activists are calling it an atlas of hate. The European Parliament condemned the LGBT-free zones back in December. It's all, again, scapegoating in the lead up to the election.
All right. Segueing into AIDS news in international contexts and the context of the coronavirus, we are now getting reports from both Mexico and China that the fear of the coronavirus is, as you know, ending up with quarantining people. And this is having a specific impact on people with HIV because they are being separated from medicines and from care. And this is, there are reports from the Institute of Social Security in Mexico that there are HIV drug shortages because they can't ship stuff in and out. There was a demonstration at the Institute over this. So that's in Mexico. And then in China, there are HIV meds are being tried against the coronavirus, and that's making for shortages for people with HIV because people are taking away their medicines and saying, no, we got to try this on the coronavirus to no good effect that anyone has seen yet.
I've been reading all the stories about this, and these are not from sensationalistic reports. They say ultimately this may, about 70% of the population of the Earth may be exposed to this virus. It is going to become one of the viruses. It's not as bad as the Spanish flu in 1918, which wiped out 50 million people on the planet, because this one is not that lethal, but it is stronger than the one in the traditional flus.
Somewhere between the regular flu and Ebola.
But 61,000 people die of regular flu in the United States every year. So it is something we're going to have to cope with, as with all of these things. Wash your hands, take care. It's especially if you're older. People are just going to have to take these kind of steps. I see San Francisco declared a state of emergency today, where we're taping, about this, and it just means taking more steps. We're not here. We are taping before we hear our dear leader speak about this tonight.
Oh, is he doing it?
Oh, I watched, 6 o'clock. I watched Larry Kudlow the days
oh my God,
while the market was plunging.
Yeah.
1,000 points one day, 900 the next day. He's on the air, to calm the markets. He's an effing idiot, and he just keeps saying, "Oh, we've got this contained."
Trump said the same thing.
Not completely tight, but we've got it contained, and it's not going to affect the economy. Boom! It just keeps while he's talking, the indicators just keep going down because he's an idiot.
Well, I think that's a great indicator of his what the market thinks of him. But Trump said the same thing. Oh, it's all under control in the United States. We don't have any problems.
This is not the kind of thing you can just completely lie about, because people will be dying if you don't take. But of course, I don't know. When they don't talk about stuff, you don't hear about it. Then people are more complacent. I have to reread Camus and the Plague or something.
Yes. What were we talking about on the way up here that we hadn't been told about that was? Something that we should have been told about.
I forget. It's already affected my mind.
Maybe we'll remember it before
I'm
the
just
end of the show,
say something.
Maybe we won't.
If we come down with this thing, we're not doing the show. We're staying home.
If one of us comes down with it, the other one we will be separated.
All right. A little entertainment news?
Yeah. Why not?
All right. Well, so Pixar, Disney, right?
Yep.
Their new fantasy film is called Onward. It's about young elves, played by Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, who discover a wizard's staff. That sounds very kinky. It features a lesbian character. Let's put her up there. Officer Spectre, a Cyclops cop.
On the left.
Yes. All right. Played by the great Lena Waithe.
On the right.
Yes. The director, Don Scanlon, said, "It's a modern fantasy world, and we want to represent the modern world." Now,
so this is coming out March 6th, for those of you marking your calendars. And the director also said, when asked, that yes, maybe they will do a spin-off of this character into a full-length film or TV series or whatever, and that Lena Waithe already has provided them with full material, all the background, all the story, everything.
Yes. Now,
well, she's kind of amazing.
One of our friends in Reclaim Pride has already said, has to be a cop. You can imagine who that was.
And a Cyclops.
Well. All right. This week,
Hey, little things here, there. We are everywhere.
Yes. We don't know what kind of a cop she is.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait for the movie.
Yeah.
The St. Pat's for All March, annual march, I think it's been going on for like 20 years now, is in Queens this Sunday at noon out there. And the Fifth Avenue Parade, of course, is March 17th, and you can march with lavender and green.
I'm very impressed by the number of Republican politicians on Staten Island who have announced their refusal to march in the St. Patrick's Parade there because the St. Patrick's officials are refusing, last St. Pat's Parade in New York City, to refuse to allow an LGBT group into the parade. In this case, the Pride Center of Staten Island. Nothing could be more neutral and inoffensive. And those officials, those parade officials are just so rigid and so stuck in the 16th century.
This is not a sexual identity parade.
That language became so outdated so long ago.
Well, that's Staten Island. I hate to say it. Although Staten Island has made progress in other ways.
It's a mixed bag on
I have an
Staten Island.
African-American city council member out there.
And, as I say, the borough president, Republican, and other Republican officials there have supported us and supported the Pride Center and said, we are not showing up to march in this parade because it is discriminatory. And it's taken us a long time to get to that point. So thank you, congratulations, and I hold out hope that the parade officials will change their mind.
They don't sound like it.
They certainly do not, but if all the Republican officials are abandoning them, that's where their bread is buttered, and that may be
the only
enough.
way we finally succeeded after 25 years in New York of protesting the regular St. Patrick's Day parade was when sponsors threatened to pull out.
Well,
and Mayor de Blasio also said, I'm not marching. After Bloomberg had marched all those years and Giuliani had marched all those years.
Koch, the closet case, right at the head of the parade.
Please.
All right. Weekly HBO update. Well, I'm still counting the days until the second season of My Brilliant Friend on March 16th. But on May 1st, HBO will premiere a series called Betty, which is about, looks very hip. I looked at the trailer. Skateboarding girls in New York City, including a little lesbian action going on. It's based on a movie called Skate Kitchen, which evidently was pretty popular. And it's 6 half-hour episodes, and that's May 1st on HBO, Betty. Although I think the singing group Betty ought to sue for use of that title.
And March 16th is also when that new series based on the Philip Roth novel.
Great American, no.
Well, it's about Lindbergh becoming president and the Nazis taking over.
Definitely
I want to
looking
look forward to that. And it's also the night of Broadway Backwards, which is the big benefit for Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and the LGBT Community Center.
Okay. So that's it for us. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining us.
We hope the news is even better. Well, we gave you some good news.
We did. There's always a little good news. But we will be looking at the South Carolina results and Super Tuesday next week. By the time we come back next week.
The whole thing will be over.
Maybe not. See you next week.
Bye.